Theo Washington was 38 years old, a civil engineer who had spent 3 years in a West Virginia work trailer, building federal infrastructure and wiring $40 out to $100 home every 2 weeks, every single one, to pay off the house he and his wife agreed would be their foundation. He had called her every night at 9 p.m. without fail. He had missed holidays. He had missed birthdays. He had given 3 years of his life to a plan he believed they both wanted. That Wednesday afternoon, he drove down his own street in Cascade Heights for the first time since he left. He used his own key. He walked into his own kitchen. And the sounds he heard coming from his own bedroom, his wife's voice, unmistakable, and a man's voice just as comfortable, stopped him where he stood. When that man came downstairs and extended his hand in introduction, Theo looked at it and said nothing. He picked up his bag, and he walked back out the front door of the house he owned. What Renee didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that Theo Washington had spent 3 years learning exactly how structures fail, and he was just getting started. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. Theo Washington watched the Atlanta skyline rise through his windshield as he guided the borrowed company truck along I-285. 3 years felt like both a lifetime and a blink. The same buildings stood against the same Georgia sky, but something about coming home made everything look slightly different, like a familiar photograph viewed from a new angle. He'd shipped his personal vehicle ahead 3 weeks ago, part of his carefully orchestrated surprise. Renee wasn't expecting him for another month. The thought of her reaction brought a small smile to his face. Not the wide, expressive kind, but the quiet type that matched his nature. His father had always said there were 2 kinds of men in the world: those who talked about building things and those who actually built them. The Washingtons had always been builders. His grandfather's hands had shaped houses across South Atlanta. His father had constructed commercial buildings that still stood proud downtown. And Theo, he built bridges, structures engineered to bear weights far beyond their original design. The federal contract in West Virginia had been a golden opportunity, the kind that could set up their entire future. He and Renee had sat at their kitchen table 3 years ago, plotting it out like architects drafting a blueprint. The math was simple. He'd take the higher-paying remote work, they'd live lean, and they'd channel everything into paying off the house. No mortgage, no debt, just freedom and possibilities. 3 years, Renee had said that night, her fingers laced through his. We can do anything for 3 years. He'd kept his end of that promise with the same precision he applied to his engineering calculations. Every 2 weeks, without fail, $4,200 went into their joint account. Every night at 9 p.m. he called, even from job sites with barely any signal, even after 18-hour days when exhaustion made his bones feel heavy. He'd missed her marketing firm promotion dinner because of an emergency site inspection. He'd spent 2 Thanksgivings alone in his work trailer, eating takeout while she celebrated with family. The sacrifice had been worth it. Every missed moment, every lonely night, every long-distance call, they were all investments in the life they'd planned. Maybe children someday, or Renee opening her own marketing firm, or both. The foundation would be there, solid and debt-free. Theo took the Cascade Heights exit, muscle memory guiding him through familiar turns. Their neighborhood hadn't changed much. The same mix of well-kept craftsman homes and modern renovations, the same proud old oak trees lining the streets. Mrs. Patterson still had her immaculate roses. The Williams family's basketball hoop still hung over their driveway. But as he turned onto their street, small discrepancies caught his engineer's eye. Their house, the elegant 2-story they'd bought 5 years ago, looked different. Not dramatically, but in ways that made him blink twice. New sconces flanked the front door, their brushed nickel finish catching the afternoon light. The mailbox wasn't the simple black one he remembered. This one was larger, with decorative scrollwork. A recycling bin sat by the curb, a name written on its side in permanent marker that he couldn't quite make out from this distance. He pulled the truck into their driveway, noting how the landscaping had evolved. New flowering bushes he didn't recognize, a stone path that hadn't been there before. The changes weren't bad, exactly, just unexpected. Like walking into a room where all the furniture had been shifted 2 inches to the left. Theo grabbed his overnight bag from the passenger seat, leaving his larger bags in the truck. He'd wanted to walk through that front door feeling light, unencumbered. The rest could wait until tomorrow. He had the deed to this house in his name alongside hers. He had his key. He was home. Standing before the dark blue front door, Theo noticed one final detail that made him pause: key hovering near the lock. The front window blinds, the ones Renee had always kept slightly open because she loved how the afternoon light played across their living room walls, were drawn completely shut. It was 4 p.m. on a Wednesday, and not a single sliver of Georgia sunshine was allowed to peek through. The key turned smoothly in the lock. At least that hadn't changed. Theo stepped into the foyer of his own home, and immediately his senses registered a series of small wrongnesses that added up to something much larger. The furniture was different. The classic brown leather couch he'd helped carry through this same door had been replaced by a sleek sectional in light gray. A modern abstract painting hung where their wedding photo used to be. The coffee table wasn't theirs either. This one was glass-topped with brass legs, nothing like the solid wood piece they'd picked out together. Then his eyes caught something that made his chest tighten. A man's coat, hanging on the hook by the door. Dark wool, expensive-looking, size 44 or 46, too large to be Ray's, too new to be forgotten by some long-ago visitor. Below it sat a pair of men's dress shoes, size 11 or 12, Italian leather that probably cost more than the work boots Theo was wearing. His mind scrambled to construct reasonable explanations. A friend visiting, a cousin staying over, Ray going through an unexpected professional phase. Each explanation felt thinner than the last, like trying to patch cracks in a failing foundation. Then he heard it. The sound came from upstairs, from their bedroom, and it stripped away every comforting lie his brain was trying to construct. Rhythmic creaking, familiar bed springs, Renee's voice, pitched in a way he'd known intimately for 8 years of marriage. And another voice, male, low and comfortable, speaking with the casual authority of someone completely at home. Theo stood absolutely still in his own foyer for exactly 11 seconds. He knew it was 11 because he counted them. The way he counted support beams or stress points or load-bearing calculations. In those 11 seconds, he felt everything he'd built over 3 years, every sacrifice, every lonely night, every careful plan, convert into something entirely different, something he had no name for yet. The sound continued overhead, oblivious to his presence below. Theo moved with careful precision, like a man walking across a bridge he no longer trusted. He set his overnight bag down silently by the door. His feet carried him to the kitchen, their kitchen, with the backsplash Renee had chosen and the granite countertops he'd paid for with overtime hours. He sat down at the table, the same table where they'd planned their future 3 years ago, where they'd calculated mortgage payments and savings projections, where she'd held his hand and said they could do anything for 3 years. 7 minutes passed. He counted those too. The sounds upstairs stopped. Footsteps. A door opening and closing. Water running briefly. Then Renee appeared in the kitchen doorway, wrapped in a dark blue robe he didn't recognize. She saw him, and in that moment, Theo witnessed something that would stay with him forever. The microscopic rearrangement of her features, the split second when surprise became calculation, before either could become guilt. It was the look of someone rapidly revising a script they'd thought they had another month to perfect. Theo? His name came out like a question, as if he were the thing that didn't belong in this kitchen. He said nothing. The silence filled the room like concrete setting. 40 seconds later, he was still counting. Another set of footsteps descended the stairs. The man who appeared in the doorway was dressed business casual, his manner unhurried. He was tall, well-built, around 40, with the kind of confidence that came from never having faced serious consequences. "Oh," the man said, as if discovering an unexpected but minor inconvenience. "You must be Theo." He actually stepped forward, extending his hand. "Derek Ossie. I suppose we should probably talk about this." The casual presumption in that gesture, the extended hand, the social nicety, the assumption that this was a situation that could be managed through polite conversation, struck Theo with a clarity that almost felt like calm. He looked at Derek's outstretched hand. He looked at Derek's face, cataloging every detail. He looked at Renee, who had moved from calculation to something approaching panic. Without a word, Theo stood up. He walked back to the foyer, picked up his bag, and walked out his own front door. Not in defeat. The distinction mattered, even if no one else would understand it. He walked out because the man who stayed to shout, to break things, to perform his pain, had already lost something else beyond the obvious. In the truck, Theo sat perfectly still for 30 seconds. Then he took out his phone and called his brother Leon. When the familiar voice answered, Theo said 5 words, his voice as level as a laser line. "I need somewhere to stay tonight." Leon's house sat on a quiet street in East Atlanta, a solid brick ranch with clean lines and careful maintenance that reflected its owner perfectly. When Theo pulled into the driveway at 11 p.m., the porch light was already on. Leon opened the door before Theo could knock, took one look at his younger brother's face, and stepped aside without a word. Some situations didn't require questions. Inside, the house felt steady, organized. Like Leon himself, who'd spent 20 years managing Army logistics before starting his own freight business. The spare room was already made up, as if Leon had been keeping it ready without knowing why. Theo set his bag down, and Leon brought him a glass of water and a spare phone charger. Practical things, necessary things, no platitudes, no demands for explanation. Theo didn't sleep. He lay on the bed fully dressed, staring at the ceiling, his mind running calculations the way it did when a bridge support showed unexpected stress patterns. By 5 a.m., he was sitting at Leon's kitchen table, legal pad in front of him, mechanical pencil moving in precise lines. Leon appeared in the doorway, already dressed. He'd been awake, probably hadn't slept either. Without discussion, he started coffee brewing and sat down across from his brother. "Joint accounts?" Leon asked, cutting straight to logistics like the sergeant he'd been. "Checking and savings," Theo replied, writing the numbers down. "Both a truist. Your name still on them?" "Should be. Haven't changed anything in 3 years. When's the last time you saw statements?" Theo paused, pencil hovering. I trusted her with that part. Sent the money, she handled the accounts. Leon nodded, not judging, just processing. "Mortgage?" "Should be nearly paid off. That was the whole point. 3 years of maximum payments. Clear the debt completely." "Your name's on the deed." "Yes." "Both names." The coffee maker beeped. Leon poured 2 cups black, set one in front of Theo. "Check the account balance now." Theo pulled out his phone, logged into the banking app. The number that appeared made him sit very still. $847.32. "I've deposited $4,200 every 2 weeks for 3 years, he said quietly. "That's approximately $109,200. Leon absorbed this, his face hardening slightly. Then he seemed to make a decision about something he'd been holding back. "I need to tell you something," he said, "and I need you to hear it straight through." Theo looked up from the legal pad. "I've been doing deliveries in your neighborhood. New contract with that warehouse off Cascade. Over the last 18 months, I saw the same car parked at your house multiple times. Dark Audi. Late model. Didn't belong there." Leon's voice carried the weight of guilt. First time, I almost stopped. Second time, too. But I told myself maybe it was nothing. Maybe I was reading too much into it. I didn't have proof, just a feeling. And I didn't want to put that weight on you when you were already carrying so much. The silence stretched between them. Leon's shoulders were set, like he was waiting for the blow. "I'm not angry at you," Theo said finally, meaning it. He picked up his phone again and made 3 calls in sequence. First to his company's HR department, requesting complete payroll documentation for the past 3 years. The HR director, who'd known Theo since he started with the firm, promised to email everything within the hour. Second call went to the Georgia Bar Association's referral line, asking specifically about property law specialists. The woman on the line took down his information efficiently. The third call went to a number he'd found in his father's old address book the night before. Victor Dunn, family law attorney. His father had used Victor 20 years ago for some property dispute. The phone rang 3 times. "Victor Dunn's office," a steady voice answered. "Mr. Dunn, my name is Theo Washington. My father James used your services in 2003. I need similar help now." A pause. "James Washington's son?" "Yes, I remember your father." "Good man. What's the situation?" Theo laid it out in 3 precise sentences. No emotion, just facts. "Can you come in this afternoon?" Victor asked. "And Theo, this is important. Don't confront anyone or touch anything in that house before we meet. Can you do that?" "Yes." "Good." 2 o'clock. Theo hung up and turned to a fresh page in the legal pad. At the top, in the block letters he'd used on engineering drawings for 15 years, he wrote, "What I'm owed." He began a new list. Victor Dunn's office occupied the 10th floor of a sleek downtown Atlanta building, the kind of place where serious decisions got made behind heavy doors. The reception area spoke of old money and discretion, dark wood, leather chairs, and the kind of quiet that cost money to maintain. Theo sat straight-backed in one of those chairs, his laptop open on his knees, cloud folder organized with the precision of someone who documented everything. 3 years of direct deposits, wire transfer confirmation, the original mortgage agreement with its carefully planned accelerated payoff schedule. He had prepared like he was presenting findings to a federal review board. "Mr. Washington?" A secretary appeared. "Mr. Dunn will see you now." Victor's office matched his reputation. Substantial, but not showy. The man himself rose from behind a broad desk, extended his hand. He was in his 50s, silver-haired, with the steady presence of someone who had seen every variation of human disaster and knew exactly how to navigate each one. "Your father was a good client," Victor said, gesturing to a chair. "Straight shooter. I see that runs in the family." Theo nodded once and opened his laptop. "I have everything documented." For the next 20 minutes, he walked Victor through 3 years of financial records, the deposits, the payment schedule, the agreement he and Renee had made about using his West Virginia earnings to eliminate their debt completely. Victor listened without interruption, occasionally making notes. When Theo finished, he turned to his computer and pulled up the county property records. "Let's see where the mortgage stands," he said, typing. Then he went very still, studying the screen. "Mr. Washington, according to this record, the current payoff amount on your home is $214,000. Theo felt something cold settle in his chest. "That's not possible. The minimum monthly payment has been maintained." Victor continued scrolling, but nothing more. Over 3 years, that would total approximately $37,000 in payments. The math was immediate in Theo's head. He'd sent $119,200. Minimum payments accounted for $37,000, which meant $72,000, he said quietly. "Gone." Victor nodded. "I'm going to need your authorization to request complete account histories, not just deposits. Every transaction, every transfer, everything that moved through those joint accounts for the past 3 years." Theo signed the forms. For 2 days, He went through the motions of life, stayed at Leon's, called his project manager in West Virginia, waited. On the third day, Victor's office called him back in. The full record lay on Victor's desk in a thick folder. "Would you like to review this together?" Theo nodded. For the next hour, they traced the pattern of spending that emerged from those pages. A weekend trip to Miami, hotel charges, restaurants, airline tickets, new furniture deliveries to the house. Thousands spent redesigning rooms Theo had never seen. And then there were the Venmo transactions. They started 4 months after Theo left for West Virginia. Regular transfers to a username he recognized now, Derek Ossie. $60 here, $80 there. Sometimes more. Never enough to trigger attention if you weren't looking carefully. But across 36 months, they told a story. "There's a legal term for this," Victor said finally. Dissipation. The deliberate depletion of marital assets. In this case, assets were systematically diverted to support an extramarital relationship. Theo sat with this. The word felt precise, clinical enough to contain what had been done to him without breaking under the weight of it. "The pattern establishes intent," Victor continued. "This wasn't impulsive spending or poor management. This was sustained financial conduct that diminished the marital estate. Combined with the evidence of how these funds were used, we have grounds for a fraud-based divorce filing." Theo looked at the stack of papers. 3 years of betrayal documented in bank statements and transaction records. Every deposit he'd made faithfully, transformed into furniture he'd never sit on, and meals he'd never eat. "How do you want to proceed?" Victor asked. "We can file quietly, or we can make noise." Theo thought about the sound of Derek's footsteps coming down his stairs, about Renee's face when she saw him at the kitchen table, about the arrogance of a man who would extend his hand in another man's house. "Quietly first," he said. "Loudly, when it matters." Victor nodded and reached for a legal pad, much like the one on Leon's kitchen table. He began drafting the separation filing, the soft scratch of his pen the only sound in the room. 2 weeks had passed since Theo left his house. He'd sent Renee exactly one text message. "I need space to process this." Nothing more. No calls. No explanations. Just silence. In her corner office at the marketing firm, Renee sat back in her chair and called her brother Ray. The phone rang twice before he picked up. "How's he doing?" Ray asked, knowing exactly why his sister was calling. "Taking it hard," Renee said, her voice carrying the practiced sympathy of someone who believed they understood everything. "He's barely communicated at all. Just that one text about needing space." She straightened a stack of papers on her desk, confident in her assessment. "You know how Theo is. He's never been good at being alone. He'll want to work things out. He always does." Ray was quiet on the other end of the line. "I mean, what else is he going to do?" Renee continued. 3 years in West Virginia, living in that trailer. He doesn't even have a social circle here anymore. He'll realize we can find a way through this." While Renee was explaining Theo's predictability to her brother, a courier walked into her office reception area. He carried a thick manila envelope with official markings. "Ms. Washington," the courier asked her assistant. "Legal documents requiring immediate signature." Renee's assistant appeared in her doorway. "There's someone here with—" "I'm on the phone," Renee waved her off. "Just sign for whatever it is." "They need your signature specifically," her assistant said. "It's from Victor Dunn's office." Renee's hand tightened on her phone. "Ray, I'll call you back." The manila envelope sat heavy in her hands. Her signature on the delivery receipt felt stiff, mechanical. As soon as the courier left, she closed her office door and tore open the envelope. Divorce papers, filed through Victor Dunn, her father-in-law's old attorney. Detailed allegations of financial dissipation and fraud. Her hands started shaking. She called Theo immediately. The phone rang 4 times before he picked up. "Are you really doing this?" Her voice wavered between anger and disbelief. "Serving me at work? In front of everyone?" There was a pause on the line. Then Theo's voice, calm and clear. "Where is the money, Renee?" The question hung in the air between them. Simple, direct, devastating in its precision. She hung up. That evening, Theo's phone lit up with an unknown number. He answered, already knowing who it would be. "Listen," Derek's voice came through, smooth and practiced. "This situation doesn't need to get messy. Renee deserves to be happy. You were never really there for her. 3 years away, always working, barely present even before that." Theo sat at Leon's kitchen table, phone on speaker, and let Derek talk. "The best thing you can do is move on," Derek continued. "Let her go. She's made her choice. You're just making this harder than it needs to be." The monologue went on for another minute, about emotional availability, about how relationships evolve, about how sometimes people just grow apart. When Derek finally ran out of words, Theo spoke once. "Thank you. This call has been recorded." The line went dead. Later that afternoon, Theo sat in his company's Atlanta office with Sandra Chen, the HR director. He'd worked with her throughout his West Virginia assignment. "We'd love to have you back permanently," Sandra said, reviewing his transfer request. "The Beltline expansion project needs someone with your expertise. The timing actually works out perfectly." "I appreciate that," Theo said. "We can fast-track this," she added. "Have you back in the Atlanta office full-time within 2 weeks?" By evening, Theo was back at Leon's kitchen table, his laptop open to apartment listings in West End. Leon walked in with 2 cups of coffee, set one down beside his brother. "Find anything?" Leon asked. "Few possibilities," Theo said, scrolling through photos of one-bedroom units. "This one on Oak Street has good bones. Walking distance to the station." He wasn't scattered, wasn't desperate. Each listing he saved met specific criteria: reasonable rent, solid construction, professional management. The same careful evaluation he'd apply to any structural challenge. "You sure about West End?" Leon asked. "Plenty of places closer to my house." "It's the right location for the Beltline project," Theo said, adding another listing to his shortlist. 20 minutes to the office. Makes sense. Every decision was deliberate. Every move calculated. While Renee sat in her office believing she understood his silence, Theo Washington was quietly and methodically building what came next. The morning sun was barely clearing the trees when Ray Holloway's car pulled up in front of Leon's house. He sat there for 5 full minutes, hands tight on the steering wheel, before finally getting out. The knock was soft, almost hesitant. Leon opened the door, his large frame filling the entrance. He recognized Ray immediately. He'd seen him at enough family gatherings over the years. "Is Theo here?" Ray asked, his voice strained. "I need to talk to him." Leon studied him for a moment, then stepped back. "Come in." Theo was already at the kitchen table, a stack of documents spread out in front of him. He looked up as Ray entered, his expression neutral. "You want coffee?" Leon asked, already moving to the pot. Ray nodded, lowering himself into a chair across from Theo. His hands were shaking slightly. Leon brought 3 mugs over and sat down nearby, not crowding, but present. "Renee got the papers yesterday," Ray started. "I know," Theo said quietly. Ray swallowed hard. "There's things you need to know. Things I should have told you a long time ago." Theo set down the document he'd been reviewing. "I'm listening." "I've known about Derek for 2 years," Ray said. The words came out in a rush. "Not from the beginning. I found out around month 12 of your deployment." Leon's chair creaked as he shifted, but he remained silent. "How?" Theo asked. "I stopped by the house unexpectedly. Derek was there. Comfortable. Like he belonged." Ray stared into his coffee. "When I confronted Renee, she had leverage." "What kind of leverage?" "I borrowed money from our mother last year. $5,000. Never paid it back." Ray's voice got smaller. "Renee said if I'd told anyone about Derek, she'd make sure Mom knew about the money. About all of it." The kitchen was quiet, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. "I should have told you anyway," Ray continued. "I've been carrying this for so long. Every time you called the house, every time you sent money home, I knew what was happening with your money, where it was going, who was spending it." Theo studied Ray's face for a long moment. Then he asked, very precisely, "Is there anything else I don't know?" Ray went completely still. The color drained from his face. "Ray," Theo said, "is there anything else?" "It didn't." Ray's voice cracked. "It didn't start after you left. The kitchen seemed to get smaller, the air thicker. The affair began 8 months before you took the job," Ray said. Tears were running down his face now. "Renee didn't just agree to the long-distance arrangement. She encouraged it. She helped you decide to go. She told you it was too good an opportunity to pass up." Leon made a sound, something between a breath and a growl, but Theo held up a hand, keeping his brother in place. "She knew what she was doing," Ray continued. "The whole plan. You going to West Virginia, sending money home, calling every night at 9. She helped design all of it. She needed you away, so she could—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Theo sat perfectly still, absorbing this information with the same careful attention he'd give to a structural report highlighting catastrophic foundation damage. "I'm so sorry," Ray was openly crying now. "I should have said something, should have warned you, should have done something." "Thank you for telling me now," Theo said quietly. Ray looked up, surprised by the calm in Theo's voice. "You should go," Theo added. "Your sister will be looking for you soon." Ray nodded, wiping his face. He stood up unsteadily. Leon walked him to the door. When he came back, he found Theo still sitting at the table, as still as stone. "Tell me what you need me to do," Leon said simply. Theo picked up his phone and found Victor's number. When the attorney answered, Theo's voice was clear and certain. "Change the filing strategy," he said. "I want fraud. I want dissipation. I want all of it documented." Victor's office was quiet except for the soft hum of the air conditioning and the rustle of papers as Theo reviewed the forensic accountant's preliminary report. 58 pages of transactions, each one meticulously documented and categorized. "Everything's here," Victor said, tapping the report. 3 years of spending patterns, all cross-referenced with bank statements and electronic transfers. Theo turned another page. The numbers told their own story. $427 at Restoration Hardware, $892 at West Elm. A weekend at the Fontainebleau, Miami Beach, $2,140. Regular Venmo transfers to Derek Ossie, starting small but growing more frequent, $60, $80, $125. The furniture delivery dates are particularly interesting, Victor noted. All purchased and installed while you were in West Virginia. High-end pieces, not the kind of thing someone buys for themselves when they're living alone. Theo nodded, his finger tracing down a column of dates. The Miami trip was in month 4 of my deployment. Yes. Hotel reservation made under Derek's name, but paid for from your joint account. Victor pulled out another document, which brings us to this. He slid a second report across the desk, thinner than the first, bound in blue. The private investigator's findings, phone records, credit card data, geolocation patterns going back 3.5 years. Theo opened it carefully. The timeline was laid out in clean, precise detail. Phone calls between Renee and Derek starting 11 months before Theo's departure. Restaurant charges. Hotel stays, local ones, discreet places outside the perimeter where people go when they don't want to be seen. 8 months before I left, Theo said quietly. Just like Ray said. The documentation is conclusive, Victor confirmed, and it transforms the entire legal framework of your case. This isn't just about division of assets anymore. This is systematic financial fraud. Theo closed both reports and sat back. What's our next step? I've already drafted the amended complaint. With this level of documentation, Renee's attorney, assuming she finds a competent one, will push hard for settlement. They won't want this in open court. And the house? I've prepared the paperwork for a disproportionate marital asset claim based on documented dissipation. Given the evidence of systematic misuse of marital funds, you're entitled to seek a larger percentage in the settlement. Theo nodded. He'd spent his career understanding load capacities, how much weight a structure could bear before it failed. Now he was applying that same analysis to the dismantling of his marriage. "There's one more thing," he said, reaching for his phone. He pulled up a number he'd known by heart for years. "Miss Izui." Holloway answered on the third ring. "Theo?" "Yes, ma'am." His voice was respectful, measured. "I need to ask something of you." "Of course. I'd like to have a family meeting. At your house, if you're willing. There are things that need to be said, and I believe Renee's family deserves to hear them directly." There was a pause. "Is this about the divorce papers?" "It's about the truth, ma'am. The whole truth. I've always believed in accountability, and your family deserves the same honesty I was denied." Another pause, longer this time. "When?" "Tomorrow evening, if that works for you. I won't take more than an hour of your time. Will Renee be there?" "Yes. Ray, too, if he's willing. Anyone else who loves Renee and wants to understand what's happened." Ms. Holloway was quiet for a moment. 6 o'clock, she finally said. "Thank you, ma'am. I'll be there." After hanging up, Theo turned back to the reports. "I need copies," he said to Victor. "Clean, professional, the kind of packet I'd prepare for a federal contractor." Victor nodded, understanding. "I'll have them ready in 2 hours." That evening, Theo stood in Leon's bathroom, adjusting his tie. His reflection showed a man in a crisp white shirt and charcoal suit, the same one he'd worn to client presentations in West Virginia. But the man in the mirror was different from the one who'd stood frozen in that foyer 3 weeks ago, listening to the sounds that shattered his world. That man had been processing shock. This man had finished processing. That man had been trying to understand what he was hearing. This man understood everything. Every transaction, every date, every calculated decision. The tie was perfect now. He straightened his shoulders, checking every detail of his appearance. Engineers don't just identify structural failures, they document them, present their findings, and ensure accountability. Ms. Holloway's living room in Stone Mountain hadn't changed in the 3 years since Theo had last visited. The same carefully arranged family photos lined the walls, the same pristine cream carpet stretched beneath their feet, the same heavy curtains filtered the late afternoon light. But everything else had changed, and the packet of documents in Theo's hand would make that change permanent. Leon stood quietly by the door as the room filled. Ms. Holloway sat in her usual armchair, her posture perfect, her expression guarded but dignified. Ray perched on the edge of the sofa, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. Denise, Renee's cousin and closest confidant since childhood, took the far end of the couch, her usual warmth replaced by something more uncertain. When Renee arrived, she wore the smile Theo recognized from countless family gatherings, bright, engaging, designed to draw people in. She'd dressed carefully in a blue dress he remembered buying her, and he understood the choice was deliberate. She thought this was about reconciliation. "Thank you all for coming," Theo began, his voice steady and professional, the same tone he used in federal contract presentations. "I asked for this meeting because I believe in accountability, and because the people who love Renee deserve to hear the truth directly." He removed the first report from his leather portfolio. The room was completely silent as he placed it on the coffee table in front of Ms. Holloway. "Over the past 3 years," he continued, "I deposited $109,200 into our joint account. The mortgage payments during that time totaled $37,000, minimum payments only, despite our agreement to pay off the house completely." He paused, letting that sink in. "That leaves $72,000 unaccounted for." Ms. Holloway opened the report with steady hands. Theo watched her face as she began to read. Page 4 shows the first significant deviation in spending patterns, he said, his voice remaining measured. A weekend at the Fontainebleau Miami Beach, $12,140, charged 4 months after I left. Page 7 shows the furniture deliveries. Restoration Hardware, West Elm, pieces I never saw because they were selected and installed while I was living in a contractor trailer in West Virginia. He turned to the next section. Pages 12 through 28 document the Venmo transfers to Derek Osei. They start small, $60, $80, but they become more frequent, more comfortable. Ray looked at the floor. Denise's hands tightened in her lap. Ms. Holloway continued reading, her expression shifting from disbelief to something deeper and colder. But the timing, Theo said, removing the second report, is what matters most. He placed the blue-bound PI report beside the first one. Phone records, credit card data, location patterns. The relationship between Renee and Derek Osei didn't begin after I left. It began 8 months before. Renee's careful smile cracked. Theo, I didn't leave my marriage, he said, speaking not to her, but to the room. I was removed from it so it could be replaced. The silence that followed was absolute. Ms. Holloway's face had completed its journey from disbelief to grief to something harder, the cold clarity of a mother seeing her child clearly for the first time. Then Denise spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I told you to tell him, Renee. I told you. The room shifted. Renee turned to Denise, betrayal flashing across her face, and in that single look, everyone understood. Denise had known. This wasn't a mistake made in isolation. This was managed, calculated. Other people had been asked to carry the weight of the secret. You don't understand, Renee said, her voice rising slightly. I was alone. He was never here. I needed emotional connection. Theo finished for her, his voice still calm. Someone who understood you? He let her words hang in the air. I wasn't emotionally unavailable, Renee. I was in West Virginia, building a future for us. While you spent it, he began gathering the reports, sliding them back into his portfolio with the same care he'd use with project specifications. Ms. Holloway, he said, turning to his mother-in-law, I have always respected you, and that won't change. Thank you for opening your home for this. He nodded to Ray, acknowledging what it had cost him to tell the truth. Then he turned and walked to the door where Leon waited, not sparing Renee another glance. The evening air was cooling as they reached the car. Leon, who had watched it all in silence, spoke for the first time. Daddy would have been proud of how you handled that. Theo nodded once and got in. The consequences began unfolding the morning after the Stone Mountain meeting, steady and unstoppable as physics. Victor called Theo at 9 a.m. sharp. Her attorney reached out, he said. They want to settle. The forensic accounting report had done exactly what Victor predicted. The documented pattern of dissipation, $72,000 spent systematically dismantling the life Theo was building, left Renee's legal position weak. Her lawyer, reviewing the evidence of pre-planned fraud, advised immediate settlement to avoid court exposure. The house is the sticking point, Victor continued. She can't afford to buy out your share, especially with the disproportionate division we're requesting based on fraud. Theo sat at Leon's kitchen table, coffee cooling beside his laptop. Then it goes on the market. The listing went up 3 days later. The photos showed the furniture Theo had never seen, the renovations he hadn't approved, the life built in his absence. The realtor mentioned motivated sellers in the description. While the house sat waiting for buyers, Ms. Holloway made her own quiet moves. She had connections at the marketing firm where Renee and Derek worked, church friends, social circles that overlapped. Without drama or accusation, she ensured the right people knew about the documented financial misconduct The premeditated nature of the affair? The manipulation of company relationships for personal gain. HR opened a review. Derek and Renee found themselves answering uncomfortable questions about expense reports, shared client meetings, time logged during that Miami trip. The scrutiny stripped away the glamour that secrecy had provided. Derek's confidence, so impenetrable when he was extending his hand to Theo in that kitchen, cracked under real pressure. He became defensive in meetings, snippy with Renee, frustrated that his professional reputation was now tied to her choices. The fantasy of their relationship, built on stolen time and other people's money, couldn't survive daylight. "He's not who I thought," Renee told Ray during a brief phone call that Ray later relayed to Theo. Her voice had been small, reality setting in. Derek had already started pulling away, making excuses about needing space, about focusing on his career. By month's end, he had accepted a transfer to the Charlotte office. Denise reached out to Theo once, through Leon. Her text was simple. "I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. I thought I was protecting her, but I was wrong." Theo replied with equal simplicity. "Thank you for your honesty." He did not respond to her follow-up message. Leon, true to his military training, executed his own quiet campaign. He never raised his voice or made threats. He simply had conversations with other business owners, with community leaders, with people who mattered in Atlanta's black professional circles. The message was clear. Derek Osei had revealed his character, and that revelation had consequences. The house sold below asking price, the market had shifted, and rushed sales rarely commanded premiums. Theo's share of the proceeds, enhanced by the fraud settlement, went straight into a separate account. He never looked at the final listing photos. Renee moved into a rental condo in Buckhead, her finances strained by the settlement and the sudden need to support herself fully. She reached out through her attorney once, asking to meet. Theo declined through Victor. Ray, unexpectedly, became the bridge between what was and what would be. He and Theo met for coffee occasionally, their conversation carefully avoiding Renee while building something new. A friendship based on the courage it took to tell the truth when it mattered. "I found a place," Theo told him during one of these meetings. "West End. Nothing fancy, but it's mine." The apartment was on the second floor of a renovated building near the Beltline. Theo furnished it slowly, deliberately, a leather couch he chose for comfort, not style, bookshelves that held his engineering texts and the novels he'd never had time to read in West Virginia, kitchen equipment selected for function rather than show. Every piece represented a choice he made for himself. The coffee table didn't come with a story about betrayal. The bed had never held anyone else's dreams. The walls were bare until he found art that spoke to him. And when he did, he hung it exactly where he wanted it. When the last box was unpacked, Theo stood in the living room of his new apartment. The evening light slanted through windows he'd chosen, falling on furniture he'd selected, in a space that held no echoes of what had been taken from him. The morning sun caught the steel beams rising against the Atlanta skyline, casting long shadows across the Beltline's concrete path. Theo Washington stood at the construction site's edge, hard hat in place, watching the crane lift another section of framework into position. The mixed-use development would bring 48 affordable housing units to a neighborhood that desperately needed them, the kind of project that reminded him why he'd chosen civil engineering in the first place. He checked his watch. 7:15 a.m. He'd been on site since 6, reviewing the day's schedule with his crew leads before the real heat set in. His morning routine hadn't changed in the 14 months since everything had shifted. Up at 5 for a 3-mile run through West End's quiet streets, shower, coffee from the local spot that knew his order, on site before sunrise. The apartment he'd chosen was smaller than the house had been, but it fit him perfectly. Second floor, corner unit, windows that caught both morning and afternoon light. He'd taken his time furnishing it, each piece selected with purpose rather than urgency. The leather armchair where he read in the evenings, the solid oak bookshelves that held his expanding collection, engineering texts sharing space with novels he was finally making time to discover. The kitchen equipped exactly how he wanted it, no compromise required. Saturday dinners at Leon's had become a constant, his sister-in-law Joyce insisting on feeding him until he protested, their kids showing him their homework and sports trophies. Leon never asked about Renee or mentioned Derek's name. There was no need. The past lived where it belonged, behind them. 3 weeks ago, he'd been sitting in a city planning meeting for this Beltline project, reviewing the structural documentation for the pedestrian bridge component that would connect the development to the main path. The woman beside him, Brianne Foster, he learned later, had been marking up the same pages with precise architectural notations. "See this support calculation?" she'd said, not looking up. "Classic overcompensation. Some engineers think doubling the load capacity makes them twice as impressive. All it does is waste materials and budget." Theo had laughed before he could catch himself, a genuine sound he hadn't expected. She'd looked over then, dark eyes sharp with intelligence, and he'd seen the same recognition of competence he tried to instill in his own teams. They'd had coffee twice since then. One dinner at a small Ethiopian place on Moreland that neither of them had tried before. She owned her firm, handled mostly mid-sized commercial projects, and carried herself with the earned confidence of someone who had built something lasting. She asked questions directly and listened to the answers without agenda. During their second coffee, she'd wanted to know about his worst professional mistake. He told her about the drainage system miscalculation early in his career, the 3 weeks of contractor rework, the month of sleepless nights. She'd nodded, then shared her own story about a support beam specification that had nearly derailed a project. No drama, no performance, just the honest exchange of people who understood that mistakes made you better if you learned from them. He wasn't in love. That wasn't what this was about. He was in something more valuable, genuine interest in another person's mind, in the way she approached problems, in the direct manner she brought to every conversation. There was no rush, no pressure, no need to be anything other than exactly who they were. The crane operator signaled, drawing Theo's attention back to the rising steel. The morning crew was making good progress. The basic framework for the 3rd floor would be complete by end of day at this rate. He made a note about checking the weld points personally once the section was secured. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Brianne had sent a photo, a load calculation spreadsheet with one column highlighted, accompanied by text. "Found your guy's ego again." 3rd column from the left. Theo smiled, recognizing the same over-engineering issue she'd pointed out in that first meeting. He typed back, "Send me the specs. I'll take a look tonight." Standing there in the strengthening morning light, watching the structure take shape, Theo felt the solid ground beneath him. He hadn't lost 3 years. He'd lost a lie he'd invested 3 years in believing. The work itself, the discipline he'd brought to it, the integrity with which he'd shown up every day, those were his. They always had been. No one could take that back. A welder called down from the framework, asking for his review of a joint connection. Theo pocketed his phone and moved toward the site stairs, each step purposeful on steel that would hold. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.